In our last session, we talked about products. In this session, we will be discussing about pricing. Pricing is one of those 4 Ps that companies feel that they have little control over. Pricing is something that companies think that is determined by the market, by outside forces, by supply and demand, and it's one of those Ps that managers believe that they have very little impact and where they can exercise very little control over. However, we will see in this session that if companies can manage wise, effective pricing, shrewd pricing strategies, it can have significant impact on the bottom line. This slide shows you that the impact of pricing and other elements and its impact on EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. So as you can see here, if you increase the price by 5%, that has a close to a 22% impact on EBIT, whereas revenues or cost of goods sold or SG&A and R&D cost, they don't come close to having nearly as much of an impact on EBIT as does pricing. So this just goes to show you that when companies can effectively manage their pricing without, obviously the assumption here is without impacting demand. If because of pricing demand diminishes significantly, obviously, then a lot of this would be nullified. But if they're able to increase pricing without affecting too much of demand, then this just goes to show you the strong and powerful impact that pricing can have on the bottom line. The role of pricing is that compared to the other 4 Ps, which are product, place, and promotion, and we haven't talked about place and promotion as of yet, but we did talk about product in our prior session. The other 3 Ps create value. And once value has been created by the company, they have to use pricing to capture the value that's been created. So if they cannot capture effectively the value that's been created, that means that they're leaving a lot of money on the table and they're not able to reap in the rewards for their efforts. So the role of pricing, one of the key roles of pricing is to capture value that has been created by the other Ps. Like I said in our previous slide, there's significant impact of effective pricing on net income. So a 1% increase in price can lead to close to a 12% increase in net income for most large, typical U.S. companies. For example, taking the example of Coca-Cola, a 1% increase in price can effectively increase net income for Coca-Cola by close to 6.4%. Research shows you that. More specifically, if we translate this into dollar amounts, this can be translated into increasing, if Coke can increase a can of Coke by slightly less than 1 cent per can, that can result in approximately $300 million an increase in net income. So this just again underscores and emphasizes the significant, powerful impact that pricing can have on profits for most companies. Now, if we look at the relationship between pricing and marketing expenditures, this framework shows you that that pricing has to be commensurate with marketing expenditures, or put differently, marketing expenditure has to be commensurate with the level of pricing. So if you look at this framework, this 2x2 matrix here, we have price that's low and high, and then we have marketing expenditures such as advertising, sales force, promotions, product development. All of these things would be under marketing expenditure. That can range from low to high. So if you look at the diagonal cells where it says feasible, that makes sense because if you want to charge a high price, you're going to have to have a high marketing expenditure to justify and convince to customers, to the market, why your product or service deserves a high price. So that's why we call it feasible. Again, when it's low, that would be feasible as well. But the more interesting situations would be the off-diagonal cells, where when you have a high price, but that's not backed up by marketing expenditure, sufficient marketing expenditure, then obviously you're not going to realize any sales. Similarly, when you have a low price, but for some reason you're spending more than you need to, then that would be where low price meets high market expenditure, and there you wouldn't realize any unit contribution, so there'd be no margins to be left with. So the optimal situation would be when a low price or a high price is matched, is aligned with commensurate levels of market expenditure. Let's think about, before we get into the details, in this session and in the next couple of sessions that I'll be talking about, we're going to be looking at price from two different perspectives. The first perspective is we're going to be looking at price from an economic perspective, and we call this value-based pricing. And value-based pricing is basically using economic value to understand pricing. And then the other opposite type of pricing is what we call behavioral pricing. And the behavioral pricing draws its concepts from psychology. So there's a huge psychological aspect that drives behavioral pricing. But first, let's take a look at value-based pricing. And in order to understand value-based pricing, we need to understand value. And value can be in marketing comprised of four different types. The first is economic value, which is the focus of this lecture, and which we will use to understand value-based pricing. So there's economic value, and then there's functional value, there's experiential value, and there's social value. So in marketing, we say that there's broadly defined, there's four different types of values. But for the sake of this lecture, we're going to be focusing on economic value. So the marketing concept suggests that the task of marketing in every organization is to deliver customer value at a profit. And value, the way that we're going to define value for our purpose here is, value here specifically refers to economic value. So value that can be quantified in monetary terms, in whatever the currency in that country may be. So value is the worth in monetary terms of the economic, technical, service, and social benefits a customer receives in exchange for the price it pays for a market offering. So a good example of economic value that can be expressed in monetary terms is the value that a customer would realize by using a product where that product is able to save cost, save money compared to a competitor. So if a company or if a customer uses, a certain, a product, let's say, a light bulb or a valve that goes into an industrial product, and because of using that product, the customer or the company is able to save cost because of higher productivity, or it uses less labor that can be quantified in terms of cost savings, then that value it's not experiential value, it's not any intangible value that has to do with any luxury or self-expression or emotional value, but the value that we're talking about here is economic value that can be expressed and quantified in monetary terms. So that's the value that we're going to be using to discuss value-based pricing. So here we have what's called the fundamental value equation, and it's expressed as VA minus PA is greater than VB minus PB. And the subscripts A and B here, you can think of these as brands A or B, brands A or B, or companies A and B. So let's explain what V represents here and what P represents here. So P is nothing more than it's the price that a customer or a company pays for a supplier's product or service. So it's like it's the price, right? It's the price that a company or a customer pays for a product. It's nothing more than that. Whereas V here is the difference between, so it's the benefits of a product minus the costs that are associated with the acquisition, use, and disposal or recycling of a supplier's market offering. So here, cost is different from price in the sense that cost can include transportation cost, they can include maintenance cost, they can include repair cost, they can include disposal cost, if it has to be environmentally friendly in terms of how you dispose it. So it's basically all the costs that a customer has to incur when using a product. That excludes the price of the offering itself. So again, V is the benefits that are associated with using the product minus all the cost except for the price that a customer has to incur when using the product.